In this video, I wanted to do something a little different. I've spoken at great length about a lot of guys I interacted with. So today, I want to speak about the guys in our crew as people and what they were like. In all fairness, keep in mind, this is my personal interpretation of them. As most of you know, we were a Brooklyn crew. And even though we were based in Staten Island, our crew represented the Lucchese's Brooklyn faction, a crew that can be traced back to the old Vario crew. Our captain was Big John Calucci, and my first impression of John was that he was acting cocky. Let me explain. My dear friend Johnny Santori often carried himself in a cocky way, but he had the credentials to back that up, and that was just Johnny Santori. That's the way he carried himself. Big John, on the other hand, I believe, was just playing a role. When I initially met Big John, he had very bad teeth, but over time, he got himself a set of new teeth, which made him smile more. I had my fair share of run-ins with Big John. However, there were times that we would talk, and he would show a much different side of himself, a decent side. And it's very possible that that's who John really was. But he felt the need to act tough. And believe me, as far as my dealings with John, he was not a tough guy. I've been to his house. I met his wife, who was very nice. I've met his daughters, his mother, and sadly his son, who passed away. At his son's wake, my heart broke for him. And of course, I knew both his brothers. Johnny Sideburn Cella. Right off the bat, my first impression of Sideburns was that he truly loved being a wise guy. After all, he was an associate for a very long time with the West Side, and then with the Lucchese's for a little while before he got straightened out. And Sideburns loved playing the part of a wise guy. And he was someone who was extremely good of getting free dinners and lunches. Sideburns liked to keep his appearance up by getting haircuts, wearing nice clothes, and of course keeping a tan. He thought I didn't know he was going to the tanning salon, but he often had a tan in the wintertime without going on vacation. I never met his daughters or the rest of his family, but he spoke about them with me, and he showed me several photos of his family. Sideburns had an apartment in Howard Beach. Surprisingly, the apartment's decorative theme was Asian. Sideburns liked to laugh and kid around a lot, but when something was bothering him, I could tell by the stress that was written on his face. One of the things that he enjoyed the most was finding out information or news and then sharing it. He loved to socialize and politic with other families, and he got around and knew a lot of guys. I truly liked Sideburns, and he was someone that I considered to be my friend. We had a lot of laughs together, and I enjoyed the time that we did have and the memories. Scotty Javas. I guess Scotty put it best when he said, "I love being a soldier." And that's who he was. If you were a general or a sergeant in an army, you'd want a guy like Scotty in your unit. And he definitely was a tough guy, but was laid back and never acted cocky. He had a great big smile with a big laugh and enjoyed food and cracking jokes. He had a knack for having people's numbers down, but was not a guy who badmouthed other people. When we did see each other, we would always talk. Scotty lived in New Jersey, but every so often he'd come to the cigar lounge or out to eat with us. And unfortunately, I would see him at the wakes that we had to attend. Vinnie Saola. He was a nice guy and a gentleman, and he's the uncle to Georgie next Saola. Vinnie owned a painting company, and for the most part, would always be seen in jeans and work boots. Him and I always spoke a lot, and he always carried himself with class. I don't have a photo of Vinnie, but he was of average height, with short curly salt and pepper hair, mostly pepper, and wore glasses. He introduced me to his wife at a party, and both him and his wife would wish me a happy holiday. Vinnie was one of the guys that I was happy to get to know. Joey de Betterto. We go back a long time, to the age of 10. And Joey mellowed over the years, but is a bona fide tough guy. And he's never once used the fact that his father-in-law is the boss of the family. He never took advantage of that. I knew Joey's whole family, his sisters, his wife, and his kids, all great people. For the most part, Joey was very quiet and serious, but he would laugh a lot when we were alone. He loved to drink and have a good time. Joey also knew that if he drank too much and I was there, he never had to worry. I would make sure to get him out of wherever we were so that he would never embarrass himself. And you know how it is when you drink a little too much. To Joey, no problem was too big. His attitude was always, "Don't worry." Sometimes in certain situations, he was a little too unrealistic. But for the most part, Joey was happy-go-lucky. But every now and then, the old Joey would emerge, and he'd mother F everyone. For me, he wasn't my friend. He was my brother, and I only wish him the best. Anthony Guzo. Anthony and I have done time together, and we were actually introduced by Johnny Santori. Anthony's father, Vito Sr., was good friends with Johnny Santori. So after doing time with Anthony, we reconnected once we both got out. We all have downfalls, myself included. And Anthony's big downfall was he was a big complainer. And as stated, we're all guilty of complaining. However, Anthony took it to the next level. He'd complain about everything. I seen a big change in him when he got married. His wife had money, and that money changed him. Anthony's with the Luccheses, somewhat due to me. I introduced him to Joey the Betterto because prior to that, Anthony was a Colombo associate. And as most people know, Anthony and I were straightened out on the same day, which should have brought us even closer, but our friendship was never the same, and I'm not going to get into it for the sake of keeping this video on the lighter side. Anthony liked to kid around when he was in the mood, which was every so often. He was very close to his daughter, his only child, who I knew, and his 2 grandsons. One day we were at his daughter's house, and one of the kids were running around, and Anthony turned to me and said, "John, look at the mitts on this kid. Those are little money counters." So that was a little taste of his humor. To be honest, after all Anthony and I have been through, our relationship should have been a lot stronger and a lot different. But sometimes for various reasons, people drift apart. Some people know this and some don't, but Mikey DeSantis was in our crew as well, up until he became the acting boss. Mikey's personality was more on the quiet side and somewhat reserved. Definitely not a showboater. And Mikey was someone who was very quick to grab a check, unlike a lot of other guys. And if he could help you with something, he would, and would go out of his way to do it. He mainly stayed in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, but would come to Staten Island to have dinner with us, and a few times we went to Rayo's, where we had a table at our disposal. Mikey was extremely athletic and kept himself in very good shape. He was in the gym every morning by 5 a.m., and he would meet some friends of his and play racquetball. And these guys he met were regular guys. Like most of us, Mikey dressed casual, but went out for dinner or a drink, he got dressed up. I noticed a few times that he was very good with his self-control, and he had a decent head on his shoulders. He was involved in several businesses, one being a real estate office, which is probably why he invested a lot of his money into real estate. I would say he was doing very good financially. My relationship with him was a newer one, because Mikey was on paper parole for a while, and I met him sometime after that. But we always seemed to have a mutual respect for one another. Let me quickly mention the Super Thanks icon, which can be found in the 3-dot drop-down for anyone that wants to show appreciation for videos like this. And thank you. For a short time, we did have all 3 Perners in our crew, Ralphie, Johnny, and Joey. All 3 of them technically belonged to the Jersey crew. Ralphie was the first one I met, and I liked him. He was a really nice guy. He definitely wasn't happy reporting to Brooklyn, and he didn't come around much. But I would see him after that in Jersey or by Joey's house. When I first met Johnny, he was a big husky kid, and I noticed he moved around like 100 miles per hour, always on the move. But his personality was quiet, and he too didn't want no part of Brooklyn. As I've mentioned before, both Ralphie and Johnny were sent back to Jersey, and a few months later we received Joe Perner, who I believe liked coming to our crew. Earlier, I described Mikey DeSantis as not a person who showboated. Joe Perner was the complete opposite. And I don't mean that in a bad way. He just liked to show off the things that he had. Initially, we clicked and got along very well. In fact, before he met me, Sideburns told him, "You're going to meet 2 of our guys, John and Anthony. Wait a week and tell me who's the better guy." And by the way, I know this because Perner told me. So after meeting us both, Perner goes to Sideburns and tells him, "I don't have to wait a week." Put it this way, his first name didn't end with a Y. In the short time that we got to know each other, we did become close. And like most of these guys, I got to know Perner's wife and sons. And I've even spent holidays at their house on a few occasions. At the end of the day, we were a group of guys that made up a crew, and all very different in our own ways. Whenever we were together as a group, we all got along and showed each other respect. And just like any crew, it has its cliques. Perner, Joey the Betterto, and myself were the younger guys out of our crew. And we did try to support each other. When my grandmother passed, they all came to the wake to pay their respects. And despite being different in many ways, I can say that we all had one opinion that was alike. And that was that none of us was a fan of having Big John as our captain. As I create this video today, I have no animosity towards any of these guys. More importantly, I don't wish them any ill will. At this point in time, all of those mentioned and myself are moving on 2 different paths in life. But the ironic part is, not only did they choose theirs, but they also chose my path. So I'll end this video by sincerely thanking them.